Amanda walked into the classroom, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on her. The murmurs started immediately, but she tried to ignore them. She didn't notice her chair had been tampered with. As soon as she sat, the chair gave way beneath her, breaking into pieces. Amanda fell to the floor with a loud thud. The class erupted in laughter, some students calling her names like Fat Olodo and Food Tank. Others chanted, "You broke it!" Their cruel laughter echoed in her ears, but Amanda couldn't move. Tears filled her eyes as she sat there, frozen in humiliation. After a few moments, Amanda slowly picked herself up. Her face was burning with embarrassment, and tears streamed down her cheeks uncontrollably. She walked out of the classroom, not bothering to wipe her eyes. She headed straight for the school garden, her only place of comfort. Amanda sat on the grass, her heart heavy with sadness. The garden was her sanctuary, the only place she felt safe. She started singing softly, her voice trembling as she cried. Music was her escape, the one thing that made her feel alive, and she had promised herself never to cry here. After a while, Amanda stopped crying. She let the music fill her soul, pushing away the pain. This was her happy place, and she wouldn't let anyone take it away from her. In the garden, she was more than just the fat girl everyone made fun of. Here, she was Amanda, a girl with a voice that could soar above all the hurt. The bell rang, signaling the end of class, but Amanda didn't move. She knew what was waiting for her outside the safety of the garden. When she finally gathered the courage to leave, she walked back to her classroom, hoping her tormentors had grown bored. But as she reached her locker, her heart sank. Written in large, bold letters were the words, "Fat Pig." Amanda stared at the words for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but it never hurt any less. Amanda wiped away the tears that threatened to spill and opened her locker. The day wasn't over, and she couldn't afford to break down again. She gathered her books and headed to her next class, her heart heavy. The stairs followed her down the hallway, whispers trailing behind her. She wished she could disappear, blend into the walls, but her body betrayed her. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the fact that she didn't fit in, literally or figuratively. As she sat in her next class, Amanda tried to focus, but her mind kept drifting back to the cruel words on her locker. It wasn't just the students who made her feel like a failure. Her own parents treated her as if she were worthless. Amanda couldn't understand why everything was so hard for her. She wasn't like the other students, and no matter how much she wished it, she knew she never would be. Among Amanda's tormentors were Mary and Martha, the most popular girls in school. They were identical twins, always together and always up to no good, especially when it came to bullying Amanda. Today was no different. As Amanda walked to her next class, she saw them waiting for her by the lockers. Her heart sank, knowing what was coming. "Hey, Fatso!" Mary called out, smirking. "What's for lunch? A whole cow?" Amanda ignored them, her pace quickening, but Martha stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Where do you think you're going? You broke the school's chair, maybe you should pay for it," she sneered. The twins laughed, high-pitched and cruel. Without saying a word, Amanda pushed past them and continued to her class, her heart pounding in her chest. She could still hear their laughter ringing in her ears as she walked away, but she didn't look back. Each day was a battle, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep fighting. After a long day at school, Amanda trudged home, feeling defeated. The trek was exhausting, especially since her mother insisted she walk to lose weight. As she entered her house, the familiar feeling of dread washed over her. Her mother, Mrs. Agnes, was in the kitchen, and Amanda knew better than to disturb her while she cooked. She quietly went to her room, hoping to avoid confrontation. However, fate was not on her side. As she turned to head to the kitchen to get some food, she accidentally bumped her leg against a chair and fell. The plate of food she was carrying shattered on the floor, sending food everywhere. Just as she began to gather herself, Mrs. Agnes stormed in. "What are you doing, you clumsy girl?" she shouted, her voice sharp and cutting. Without warning, Mrs. Agnes slapped Amanda across the face. "You will eat every last bit of that from the floor!" she yelled, pointing to the mess. Amanda felt humiliated, tears streaming down her cheeks as she dropped to her knees. She picked up bits of food with shaking hands, feeling like a dog begging for scraps. This was not just about the food, it was another reminder of how unworthy she was in her mother's eyes. After the incident, Amanda retreated to her room, burying her face in her pillow to stifle her cries. She had always wanted a mother's love, but all she received was scorn. The world felt heavy, and the garden, once her refuge, seemed far away. As she drifted off to sleep, Amanda resolved to escape the pain that surrounded her, even if it meant finding solace in her music alone. The next day at school, Amanda felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. As she walked to her first class, she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching her. The hallway felt endless, filled with whispers and snickers. Suddenly, she heard the familiar voice of Mary behind her. "Look, everyone, it's the walking buffet!" Mary's laughter rang out like a bell, and soon Martha joined in, making a show of pretending to be Amanda. The other students laughed, and Amanda's heart sank. She quickened her pace, desperate to escape their taunts, but it felt like the whole school was against her. During lunch, Amanda found herself sitting alone in the garden. She pulled out her music notebook, pouring her emotions into lyrics as tears streamed down her face. She felt so lost and hopeless. The garden was her only sanctuary, where she could express herself without fear of judgment. As she sang softly to herself, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "What's that you're singing?" It was a girl from her class, someone Amanda had never spoken to before. She looked at Amanda with genuine curiosity instead of the usual cruelty. For a moment, Amanda was taken aback but decided to share her song. As she sang, the girl listened, her expression softening. When Amanda finished, the girl smiled. "You have a beautiful voice. Don't let them get to you," she said before walking away. For the first time in a long while, Amanda felt a flicker of hope. The days turned into weeks, and the bullying seemed relentless. Mary and Martha made it their mission to make Amanda's life miserable, always finding new ways to humiliate her. One day, as Amanda walked home from school, she noticed a bus pulling up next to her. Mary leaned out the window, a cruel grin on her face. "Hey, Amanda, look!" she shouted, holding a half-full Coke. Before Amanda could react, Mary tossed the drink out of the window. The sugary soda splattered all over Amanda, soaking her clothes. Laughter erupted from the bus as it sped away. Amanda felt a wave of humiliation wash over her, and tears pricked her eyes. She stood frozen for a moment, feeling like the world was collapsing around her. When she finally got home, Amanda burst into tears. She hated feeling this way, hated the pain that seemed to follow her everywhere. The hurt from school seeped into her home life, making everything feel heavier. "Why can't they just leave me alone?" she thought, as she changed out of her sticky clothes. The constant bullying was taking a toll on her spirit, but music remained her only escape. That evening, Amanda sat at the backyard, her heart aching. She took a deep breath and began to sing, pouring all her emotions into the melody. With each note, she felt a little lighter, a little freer. Despite everything, she vowed to keep singing, to find strength in her music, and to keep dreaming of a better future, even when it seemed far away. The following week brought yet another confrontation. During recess, Amanda was in the garden writing in her music notebook when she heard the unmistakable sound of laughter approaching. It was Mary and Martha, accompanied by their group of followers. They spotted Amanda and immediately turned their attention to her. "Look, it's the school's biggest joke!" Martha shouted, and the group erupted in laughter. Amanda felt her heart race. She had been trying so hard to stay focused on her music, but their taunts felt like daggers. "Why don't you just stick to singing? Oh, wait, nobody wants to hear you," Mary chimed in. Mary grabbed Amanda's music notebook. "What's this, fatty? Some sad little songs?" she mocked. Amanda, tired of being pushed around, demanded her notebook back, but Mary refused. Amanda had had enough. As Mary waved her notebook in the air, teasing her, something inside Amanda snapped. She lunged at Mary, grabbing her by the arm and shoving her to the ground. The other girls gasped in shock, but Amanda didn't care. She was tired of being their victim. With a fury she had never felt before, she pounced on Mary, pinning her down and hitting her. The fight was brutal. Amanda hit Mary until she was crying, her nose bleeding and one of her teeth knocked out. The crowd of students that had gathered to watch was silent, too stunned to move. Finally, when Amanda was pulled off Mary, she realized what she had done. But instead of feeling ashamed, she felt a strange sense of satisfaction. For once, she had stood up for herself. After the fight, Mary was rushed to the hospital. Amanda was summoned to the principal's office. She felt a knot in her stomach as she sat in the waiting room, her heart racing. This was it, the moment she had both dreaded and anticipated. She was finally standing up for herself, but at what cost? The door opened and she was called inside. The principal, Mr. Johnson, looked serious as he addressed Amanda. "I understand there was an incident during recess today," he began. Amanda felt her throat tighten. She explained what happened, emphasizing that she didn't want to fight but had reached her breaking point. Mr. Johnson listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. After a long pause, he sighed. "I appreciate your honesty, Amanda, but violence is not the answer. I'll need to suspend you for 2 weeks." Amanda's heart sank. She felt a mix of anger and disappointment, knowing she had finally stood up for herself but now faced consequences. When Amanda returned home, she expected her mother to be furious, but instead Mrs. Agnes seemed indifferent. "Whatever," she muttered, waving her hand as Amanda told her what happened. "You'll still have to deal with the repercussions. You're a failure, and this won't change that." Amanda retreated to her room, her emotions swirling. She felt alone and defeated, but deep down, she knew she couldn't let this stop her. As she sat on her bed, her notebook open in front of her, she began to write, pouring her heart into her music. This was her outlet, her escape from the pain that surrounded her. She would keep singing no matter what. During her 2-week suspension, Amanda spent most of her time in her room. The days felt long and lonely, but she found solace in her music. She wrote song after song, channeling her emotions into lyrics. Music was her refuge, a place where she could express herself without fear of judgment. Her suspension was nothing compared to the punishment she received at home. For 2 weeks, her life was a living hell. Her mother's hatred seemed to grow with each passing day, and Amanda felt more and more isolated. She began to wonder if life would ever get better. Would anyone ever see her for who she truly was? Or was she destined to be nothing more than the fat Olodo everyone claimed her to be? After Amanda's suspension ended, her parents insisted she drop out of school. Mrs. Agnes declared that Amanda was a failure and that they wouldn't waste any more money on her education. 2 months later, her mother started a banana business for her. Every day, Amanda would carry a tray of bananas on her head and hawk them in the market. This became her routine for the next 2 months. She walked the streets selling bananas, her dreams of escaping her miserable life slipping further and further. One afternoon, as Amanda was crossing the street with her tray of bananas, she didn't notice the speeding car coming toward her. The screech of tires filled the air just before the car slammed into her. Everything went black. When she awoke, she found herself in a hospital bed, her leg in a cast and pain coursing through her body. The driver who hit her, Mr. Ernest, was a kind man who rushed her to the hospital. His wife, Mrs. Ernest, arrived soon after, deeply concerned about Amanda's condition. They contacted Amanda's parents, but her mother showed little interest in her well-being. As Amanda lay in the hospital, she felt more abandoned than ever. But something in Mrs. Ernest's eyes gave her hope. The doctor informed her that her leg was broken and it would take 2 months for her to walk again. Amanda's heart sank, knowing she would be even more of a burden at home. However, Mr. and Mrs. Ernest, noticing how neglected she was, made a surprising offer. They would take care of Amanda during her recovery. With little hesitation, her parents agreed, eager to be rid of her. Amanda moved into the Ernest household, feeling a mixture of anxiety and relief. The house was grand, nothing like the small, cramped space she shared with her parents. Mr. and Mrs. Ernest treated her with kindness and respect, something she had never experienced at home. The housekeepers and staff also welcomed her warmly, making her feel like part of the family. Mrs. Ernest, a loving and attentive woman, took it upon herself to help Amanda heal, not just physically, but emotionally. She encouraged Amanda to be confident, telling her that she was beautiful just as she was. For the first time in her life, Amanda started to believe it. Every morning she would sing to herself, her angelic voice filling the house with joy. Mr. Ernest, hearing Amanda sing one day, was amazed by the beauty of her voice. He complimented her talent, and soon the whole household knew of her gift. Amanda started to feel something she hadn't in years. Hope. Hope that she could be more than the bullied girl at school, more than the disappointment her parents saw her as. In this new home, Amanda began to see a future for herself. As Amanda's leg healed, Mrs. Ernest became more involved in her life. She encouraged Amanda to chase her dreams and taught her how to believe in herself. Every day, Amanda would stand a little taller, walk with a bit more grace, and carry herself with newfound confidence. She no longer felt like the scared, humiliated girl who had been bullied her entire life. Mrs. Ernest helped Amanda rediscover her love for music. They would sit together in the afternoons, discussing music, life, and everything in between. Amanda opened up to Mrs. Ernest about the bullying she had endured at school and the cruel treatment from her parents. Mrs. Ernest listened patiently and reassured Amanda that her past did not define her. Amanda's confidence grew with each passing day. She began to practice singing more seriously, and Mrs. Ernest, who had connections in the music industry, promised to help Amanda pursue a career in music. For the first time in a long while, Amanda felt like she had a purpose. She wasn't just the overweight, slow girl everyone made fun of. She was Amanda, with a voice that could touch. One morning, as Amanda practiced her singing, Mr. Ernest entered the room with an exciting announcement. Mrs. Ernest had arranged for Amanda to have a meeting with a music producer. Amanda was stunned. She had never imagined that her voice, the one thing that brought her comfort, could actually lead to something more. At first, Amanda was nervous. What if the producer didn't like her? What if she wasn't good enough? But Mrs. Ernest reassured her, reminding her of the strength she had gained and the talent she possessed. "You've been through so much, Amanda," she said softly. "Now it's time to show the world who you really are." With a renewed sense of purpose, Amanda agreed to the meeting. She was no longer the timid girl who let others walk all over her. This was her chance to take control of her life, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. The meeting was set for the following week, and Amanda spent every day practicing, determined to make the most of this opportunity. When the day of the meeting finally arrived, Amanda was both excited and terrified. The producer, Mr. Jacobs, was a well-known name in the music industry. He arrived at the Ernest household, and after introductions, they sat down in the music room. Amanda felt her palms sweating, but Mrs. Ernest's encouraging smile gave her the push she needed. Amanda took a deep breath and began to sing. The melody flowed out of her, pure and beautiful, filling the room with emotion. As her voice rose and fell, she lost herself in the music, forgetting her fears and doubts. When she finished, there was silence for a moment, and then Mr. Jacobs clapped slowly, his face filled with admiration. "Amanda," he said, "you have something special. That voice is incredible." Amanda's heart swelled with pride. For the first time in her life, someone outside of her small world believed in her. Mr. Jacobs offered to work with her, to help her develop her voice and record some songs. Amanda couldn't believe it. Her dream was becoming a reality. Over the next few weeks, Amanda worked closely with Mr. Jacobs. He taught her about the music industry, vocal techniques, and how to perform with confidence. Each day, Amanda felt herself growing not just as a singer, but as a person. She was no longer the girl who let others define her worth. She had found her passion, and it was driving her forward. The Ernests continued to support Amanda in every way. They attended her sessions, encouraged her to be her best, and celebrated each small victory. The love and care they showed her made Amanda realize just how much she had been missing all these years. For once, she felt like she belonged somewhere. With Mr. Jacobs's help, Amanda recorded her first few songs. When she heard her voice played back through the speakers, it felt surreal. This was her, the same girl who had been mocked and bullied, now creating something beautiful. She was determined to prove to herself and the world that she was more than the names they had called her. As Amanda's songs were finalized, Mr. Jacobs began reaching out to his contacts in the music industry. One of her songs caught the attention of a major label, and they requested a meeting with Amanda. She couldn't believe how fast things were moving. Just months ago, she had been the target of cruel jokes and bullying. Now, her dream was within reach. The meeting with the record label was scheduled, and Amanda was both excited and nervous. On the day of the meeting, Mrs. Ernest accompanied her, offering words of encouragement. The executives at the label were impressed with Amanda's voice, but they wanted to see her perform live before making any decisions. Amanda agreed, knowing this was her chance to show them the full power of her voice. The performance was scheduled for the following week, and Amanda poured her heart into rehearsing. Every note, every lyric, and every emotion was carefully practiced until she was ready. Mrs. Ernest stood by her side, reminding Amanda that she had come so far and that no matter what happened, she was already a success. The day of the live performance arrived, and Amanda stood backstage, her heart pounding. This was the moment that could change her life forever. She took a deep breath, recalling all the struggles she had faced, the pain, the bullying, and the rejection. She was no longer that girl. She was Amanda, and she was about to show the world her true self. When she walked onto the stage, the lights were blinding, but the audience was silent, waiting for her to sing. Amanda closed her eyes, and as the music started, she felt the familiar comfort of the melody wash over her. Her voice soared, and she poured every ounce of emotion into her performance. She was no longer singing just for herself, but for every person who had ever felt like they didn't belong. As the final note hung in the air, the audience erupted in applause. Amanda opened her eyes to see the entire room standing, clapping, and cheering for her. Tears filled her eyes as she realized she had done it. She had shown the world who she truly was. The label executives were equally impressed, and they offered her a recording contract on the spot. Amanda's journey had only just begun. Amanda's debut album was released a few months later, and it quickly gained traction. Her voice, filled with raw emotion, touched the hearts of many, and her story of overcoming adversity resonated with listeners. The media took an interest in her, not only for her music, but also for her inspiring journey from being bullied to becoming a rising star. Amanda's life changed dramatically as her fame grew. She was invited to perform at prestigious events, interviewed on radio shows, and featured in magazines. Despite her growing success, Amanda remained humble, always remembering where she had come from and the people who had helped her along the way. The Ernests continued to support her, attending every concert and encouraging her every step of the way. With her newfound fame, Amanda also became a voice for those who had been bullied. She spoke out about her experiences, using her platform to inspire others to stand up for themselves and to never give up on their dreams. Amanda's transformation from a bullied, insecure girl to a confident and successful singer was a testament to her strength and resilience. Amanda's fame had spread far beyond her imagination, and soon people from her past began to take notice. Her classmates, the ones who had bullied and ridiculed her, started to reach out. They sent her messages of apology, asking for forgiveness and even wanting to be friends. Amanda was torn. While she had moved on from the pain they caused, it was difficult to forget the years of torment. One day, Amanda decided to visit her old school, Summit Secondary. She walked through the familiar hallways, but this time, she held her head high. She was no longer the girl who sat quietly at the back, afraid of what others would say. As she entered the school grounds, students whispered and pointed, not out of cruelty, but out of awe. Amanda had become someone they admired. Amanda went to the principal's office, where she was warmly welcomed. The principal congratulated her on her success and invited her to speak to the students about her journey. Standing before the very people who had once mocked her, Amanda shared her story of perseverance, and it reads, "I've traveled to many countries, and each nation has its own idea of beauty. What I've learned over the years is that these standards change from culture to culture, and even from one generation to the next. But one thing that never changes, no matter where you are in the world, is the power of your confidence. Your beauty is not defined by your shape, height, or color. It's defined by how you see yourself. When you believe in yourself, you unlock your true potential. I used to be bullied because I didn't understand my own worth. I didn't love myself enough, and I allowed others' opinions to shape my identity. But everything changed when Mrs. Ernest came into my life. She helped me see my true value. I'm also incredibly grateful for this YouTube channel, Top Women, which played a huge role in helping me rebuild my confidence. So to anyone who feels like giving up on themselves, don't. You are so much more than what others say. Your journey is unique, and your confidence is your greatest asset. Believe in yourself, embrace who you are, and never stop reaching for your dreams." Her words left a lasting impact on the students, who now saw her not as the girl they had bullied, but as a role model. After her visit to the school, Amanda felt a sense of closure. She had faced the place that had caused her so much pain, but she had done so with strength and grace. One day, while Amanda was at the Ernest household, her parents arrived unexpectedly. They had heard about Amanda's success and came to see her. At first, Amanda was reluctant to face them. The memories of their harsh words and neglect still hurt deeply. But with Mrs. Ernest's gentle encouragement, Amanda agreed to speak with them. Her parents apologized, saying they were wrong for how they had treated her. They admitted that they had never believed Amanda would amount to anything, and now they were ashamed of their actions. Amanda listened quietly, her heart conflicted. She knew she had every right to turn them away, but something inside her told her that forgiveness was the final step in her healing process. With a calm and steady voice, Amanda forgave her parents, but she made it clear that she was not the same girl they had once mistreated. She had found her strength and would no longer allow anyone to diminish her worth.